Hey everyone, last week Jamie Trull and I went on a live on her YouTube channel and also in her Facebook group and discussed the PPP program, kind of a year looking back, what we thought as we were helping people through this process and trying to digest all of the guidance and everything that came along the way. So we had a really great conversation. So I brought it here to you today because I thought we could reflect a little bit on what this past year has been like. If you want to, if you even want to go down that, we talk about going down memory lane, and it's kind of a weird road, right? If you have any comments, we'd love to see your experiences and hear your experiences. So feel free to put them in the comments below. We'd love to just know whether or not you feel like the PPP program really did help your business. I think the anecdotal evidence is just as important right now because we have the statistical stuff from the SBA, but really what we want to understand is like, did it actually help you? Let us know. I think that's really what we would like to know about all of this. And, we're interested to hear your thoughts too. So here's the conversation between Jamie and I. I hope you enjoy.
So hi everybody. Thanks for tuning in wherever you're watching this, because Hannah's also going to be putting this up on her YouTube channel as well. So wherever you're watching this, whether it is my YouTube channel, Jamie Trull, or Facebook, or Hannah's Clara CFO page, hello. And I'm going to put our YouTube channels up just to make sure that everybody knows them. Here is Hannah's. Everybody needs to make sure they're subscribed to Hannah's YouTube channel. She has so much amazing content on all the things. She talks a lot about PPP, EIDL, all of these different programs that are going on, and also just some general financial education, which we all need to have. And then here is my YouTube channel. So make sure you're also following me, because that would be great.
Absolutely.
So today we're going to take a little bit of a stroll down, this, like I said, kind of weird, twisted memory lane of the last year, specifically talking about the PPP program. And Hannah and I have been in contact a lot. We met on YouTube, which is kind of a weird story, I guess, but we met on YouTube. I saw her videos. She was actually one of the only other women who was putting out videos on this topic back a year ago. So whenever you'd search for PPP or things like that, it would be me, a bunch of dudes, and Hannah. And I said, I kind of like this girl. Yeah. And I reached out, and the rest is history. So Hannah, introduce yourself to people who don't know you.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me. Hannah Smolinski. I'm also a CPA. Jamie and I kind of have like pretty similar background, really. Came from public accounting. We kind of did like corporate for a little bit, and then started our own businesses, having these like, I have a virtual CFO agency where we help small business owners with CFO level information and guidance. So this kind of the YouTube thing has been an attachment to my business, my CFO agency, but it's become like kind of something that's been a bigger, I guess, just a bigger thing in the business overall. And so it's been a wonderful way to be able to get a lot of information out really quickly, especially with this whole past year and everything that's happened from the CARES Act, and then everything that's happened subsequent to that. So my company is Clara CFO Group. So that's the name of the YouTube channel. And then you can find us at claracfo.com.
Yes. And thank you, Hannah. And so for those who don't know me, I'm Jamie Trull. I was a virtual CFO. That's what I did. And then now I do more kind of group courses and programs. I'm a financial literacy coach and profit strategist. So that is what I do. But again, both of our businesses kind of got a little bit derailed about a year ago from what we were focusing on to, okay, now, there is a different need that is out there, right? Mm-hmm. So tell me, let's talk a little bit about that. Let's kind of go back in time. Let's, do this little like do and go back to, I guess it was the end of March, right? I know that date. I guessed it was the end of March. I know it was March 27th of 2020. That's when the CARES Act was passed. And as are you well aware of that date. So what were you doing then? And then what led you down this road where we are now?
Oh man. I mean, I think I remember that pretty vividly as well, because I remember being on a client call, and this was before the CARES Act was passed. And somebody said to me, oh, what about these forgivable loans that they're putting into this, stimulus package? And I had been totally head in the sand. Everything had just shut down here. I'm in the Seattle area. And that was like, I moved into a new house, and then 2 weeks later, everything shut down. So I was in full like kind of tunnel vision mode of like, how do I survive? How do I like keep my kid at home and, do the whole thing? So it was definitely, just in full transparency, a total wake up call to kind of, be like, oh, what are these things? And so like that call triggered me to start just a whirlwind of research. And I figured out what this PPP loan was. It was before the act had actually passed. So I was able to start like getting on this, and I was like, oh my goodness, like this is something that nobody's going to know about. The smallest businesses are not going to know about this. And so that was kind of like the big red flag to me of like this first come first serve program. Oh my gosh, like this money's going to be gone before the little guys know about it. That was kind of like my first initial thought.
Yeah. And I think like that's one thing that I think you and I are really similar on, is the fact that this didn't start, like we didn't learn this out of like opportunism, or like it was like, there is a call out there. People need this information. I know I was in my Facebook group, which at the time we had, I don't know, maybe 5,000-6,000 people, somewhere in that realm, in the financial literacy for women Facebook, or for women business owners Facebook group. And all of a sudden, and I'm normally teaching financial literacy, profit strategy, how to maximize your profit, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody was asking questions or wanted to hear about how to maximize their profit when their businesses were shut down. Right. And so all of a sudden, all of the questions just turned, and the whole discussion turned towards, okay, like I've heard about these things. What's going on? Is there anything that can help me? I don't know what to do. And so when the CARES Act was passed, I just sat down that weekend. I remember it so well. I can't tell you how much coffee I went through. I read 800 pages of the CARES Act. Now I'm a lot better at actually like being able to kind of ferret through and like understanding what I need to focus on and not. But at the time, I'm just like, I don't know, I'm going to read every word and try to understand what is happening. Yeah. And it was like so new, right? So there was, you couldn't find a blog article helping you. It was just, there was no interpretation out there. And so people needed help. They, of course, made things, overly complex, right? Right from the get-go. Right. And so it was just like, okay, we can get this information out into the world, right? There was no grand plan there. But in the meantime, both of us, from a viewership perspective, grew our viewership quite a bit. We went from 5,000 or 6,000 people in the group to now, over a year later, 36,000, I think. Hannah,
I just saw your numbers
all over YouTube. Oh, you're good. So, tell me, like, what was that like, just to kind of, in those early days, how would you describe the feeling?
Pure like panic. I mean, it was panic, but it was this like real sense of, I was talking with another CPA friend of mine, and I was like pacing around my kitchen, and I was like, people are not going to know about this. What are we going to do? And because she also is in that small business space, and she did a lot of bookkeeping and taxes for people. But so we ended up kind of doing a joint Facebook Live, like where we were both on, and we were trying to understand as much as we could about what was going on. And that was kind of the first kind of step into that. Well, we've got to start educating, or like, starting to at least tell people about this, because the program was opening in like 2 days by the time we had that thing, or that webinar. And it was just like, okay, like panic, let's get this out. Let's try to start talking about it. And then from there, we took that webinar, put it up on YouTube, because I had this like really small, I think I had maybe like 50 subscribers on my YouTube channel. It was something that like I had never really put a lot of, effort or, whatever into, but I was like, well, this is a place that people go when they want answers. Yeah. So maybe if I put this up there, people will see it, and then they will be able to maybe learn about the program. So that's kind of where like it all started. And from there, it was like, oh yeah, people actually do want to know about this, and they have a lot of questions. And then it was like, question, I'd go and research, figure out what the answer was, come back and try to do a video on it. And then that's you were in the exact same boat, it seems like.
And then it would change, right? And so then it was just like the most, you'd spend all this time researching it, all of these things, and then they'd issue new guidance. And the speed at which things were changing at that point, like I just ended up almost de facto, like I was every day live in the group, like, here's the changes for today. Here are the things you need to know about today. Because it was so crazy, like how quickly, and they started this program without all the guidance out there to begin with, right? And I was on a webinar and I was like, this is so true. And one of the SBA reps on this webinar said, basically, we are building a plane while it's flying, right? Like, what would happen? I wonder what would happen if we actually tried to build a plane while it was flying, right? Like, we don't know what would happen. And that's kind of what happened at the beginning of PPP, where it was just crash and burn, right? Like it just, you couldn't get loans. And the very, we talk about this, like the rounds get confused, depends on how long you've been in the PPP world. What round do you think we're in now, right? Yeah. But that, like, original first round of PPP. And what I mean by that is like that first amount that they had authorized under the CARES Act was gone in a couple of weeks. I mean, it was gone. And we all know who took the majority of that money, or a lot of that money, right? The people that kind of got precedence, and that's where a lot of the big banks, we saw the blowback that happened against them last April and May with these big banks that were prioritizing their biggest clients, right? And their biggest clients also who probably had access to capital in other ways with these loans, and that money just disappeared. And I feel like I remember the desperation that I kept feeling from so many business owners that were like, I don't know what to do right now. I can't pay my workers. I don't know if my business is going to make it through this. And it's just like, it still puts me back in that place of just, no one had any idea what to do, or if they were able to get help. Right.
Yeah. Well, and I think that if we kind of take that and we say, well, what was one of the bigger failings of the program, I'd say would be this. I mean, that's always hard because they wanted to do it quickly. And that's where I always feel like there was this tension between urgency of getting money out and then the development of guidance, and really like having, and it wasn't a direct SBA program. It was an SBA program through the bank. So then the banks had to get on board. Yeah. So, and they had to set up their systems, and they had to be able to take this influx of crazy amounts of applications, which they had probably never, ever seen before.
Yep.
So we were having this like real tension. And then it was a first come, first serve program. Yeah. Which
wasn't,
benefits people who have existing banking relationship. It benefits people who call their banker up and know them by first name. It benefits people who have accounting departments that can pull this stuff together for them. It definitely has, some inequity, I think, when we kind of talk about the program from that perspective.
So much. And I feel like too, in that beginning time frame, people couldn't find a bank, right? If you didn't have a banking relationship, they didn't have, like, at that time, the fintechs, as we call them, PayPal, Cabbage, all those weren't offering it. It was just like, do you have a business bank, and are they offering it? And are you big enough for them to pay attention to you? Or is your application going to go into this black hole and never know what's going on? And there were no systems built out, right? Now we have portals and all, none of that existed. And so it was kind of, and I see the difficulty because I also talked to bankers at the time, and I did not envy that position either. Like, let's just, for all that we can say about that, I know a lot of people that worked really hard on the banking side too. And they were like, we don't know what's going on either. And we're waiting on guidance, but we're trying to help people and we're trying to get them loans. And, there were so many people that were just putting everything that they could into it, and then things would change. And then, that was crazy. I don't know how much you slept. I didn't sleep a whole heck of a lot. I know a lot of business owners didn't sleep a whole heck of a lot. I think there was just a collective period of at least 3 months there where we were all like, what is going on?
Yeah. I would basically like roll over bed, like in bed in the morning, and look at my phone and be like, PPP news, like what is happening? Or go straight to the Treasury website. What new information has been posted? And what new guidance, what new interim final rule.
Yep. So many interim final rules.
Yeah, because we had that time where, we were, and I think that's hard too, because there was tons of people really trying to seek doing the right thing with the money.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to misstep, and they did want to use it in the right intended way, because, obviously they wanted to get it forgiven, but also like it was a big chunk of money that, was kind of unprecedented. Nobody ever just throws you, $150,000 in your business when you're struggling, and potentially tells you, hey, and you don't have to pay it back if you spend it in the right way. So that was the big thing, is everybody was just trying to like seek for what is that right way. And when things are constantly shifting and changing, you just kind of feel like you're walking on eggshells, and you don't really want to take an action one way or the other. So I do think when the Flexibility Act passed, which was in June, which extended the timeline from 8 weeks to 24 weeks for all borrowers, where they could spend the money in that, I think that was like a huge sigh of relief. I think it was a needed change to the program. But then all the people who had already spent their money, they were the ones that were like, well, wait a second,
Yeah.
I could have totally not just given employees money for doing nothing, like if I could have had more time to spend it.
That's the trend we saw over and over and over, where yes, eventually they would remedy a big problem with the program, i.e. the term to use it over, right? Or the documentation requirements, or all these different things. But the amount of time between that and the uncertainty, like you had to go based on the rules that existed. You had no idea, right? And then Congress, like, you'd think something was going to pass, and then we thought back in August they were going to extend PPP, and it wasn't until December, right? Like it was just crazy. So you couldn't count on what was going to happen in the future. You had to go based on the rules that existed at the time. And the problem is the people that did the right thing and used it, because they wanted to get it forgiven, specifically those people that got it really early, they were on it, they got it early, and they used it all within 8 weeks to pay people who weren't even working, right? To pay people who weren't even working, when they could have had a whole 24 weeks and used that actually to bring people back to work when they actually needed them. That would have been a game changer for a lot of companies, but we didn't have, that information didn't exist. Those rules changed and morphed and did get better. But one of the things I kept telling people, especially even in the forgiveness realm, right? Because now that's what we're going to be seeing a lot now that PPP is largely closed, is the forgiveness aspect of it. And I think that that's something that's going to come up quite a bit is, what I just say is just wait. If there's something that is unfavorable, or you're worried about it, or we're unsure right now, just wait. If it's something important to you, write your Congress people, or, the SBA or something like that. But we're kind of in that zone of, the rules only have gone one way. They have only gotten, looser, not necessarily, they put in more protections around fraud, but the rules for people who are using it correctly have only gone the way of being looser. And I think too, when I think back to like, why did they give it an 8-week period to start with? It makes me like chuckle a little bit at just, it was all kind of our thought, like, okay, we're going to close down for 2 months, and then life is going to resume as normal, right?
I was gonna bring that up, because I was thinking like, wow, that was the mentality back then of let's just get through the next 2 months. Yes, we're gonna shut down the economy because we've got to, everybody will stay home for 5 weeks. I remember like towards the very beginning, there was some messaging that said, if we could all just shut down for like 5 weeks, we could kind of kill the virus. Like I remember that. That might even, I remember seeing that on national news at some point. So obviously that's been buried. That's not, not the case anymore. But that was the thing. We were thinking, hey, this is going to be over soon, guys. No worries. Well, we're going to give you some money and then it'll be over. So
in some ways, I'm glad I didn't know. I think about, had I known back in March, April of 2020, that my son would be about to do his last week of online school next week, he would not have set foot in a school building for over a year. I wouldn't have, it would have baffled my mind. Like I
Mhm.
just couldn't, but it does show us we are resilient. We can
Right.
overcome things, but oh my gosh, we had no idea, right? That we'd be
Right.
like multiple, now we get a second PPP loan. Now just all the morphs and changes throughout this process. And I also want to talk to, right? And we've talked about this some. I also think that this program, one of the problems, and I think we can talk about like, what would we have done different? Like if we now looking back, like what, obviously we needed a longer cover period to start with. What would we have done different? I think the fact that they tried to put, sole proprietors, self-employed people, contractors into the same boat as businesses that had, a couple hundred employees, right?
Right.
It's a different ball game. And you could
Totally.
tell that even when they wrote the rules, they didn't really understand how true like small business 1099 contractors,
Right.
real small business worked. And so they didn't realize that the rules they were putting in place were incredibly cumbersome and confusing. Even if they didn't intend for a lot of those rules to apply to those people, it wasn't really clear. And so it created a lot of like, well, that doesn't apply to me because I don't have payroll, right? A lot of people, there are still people today, a year later, that they're like, oh, I didn't know I could get that.
Yeah.
Right.
And now the money's out, but
And now it's gone.
yeah,
It's gone. And that lasted for so long where people didn't realize that they were, that they could get it. And then they finally changed it, right? The other problem with it was using the Schedule C line 31, right? The net profit, which didn't account for the fact that people probably still had expenses in their business they had to pay. And now, because they didn't have a high enough net profit, they couldn't get it before. And they finally changed that, but they changed it at the worst possible time.
Yes.
Right? Oh my gosh.
Absolutely. I think I was thinking about like how could that have been handled differently?
Yeah.
And because I do think that the people who had employees, you get average payroll, you pull your payroll reports, and I've seen that work really well for especially consulting type businesses that have people on salary and like they're just continuing to pay people, or they have people on hourly wages and those people are still working, the business is still operating, and this is helpful to just keep them afloat when revenue is coming in at a lower level. Like, I think it's actually good. Now, could that have been for a longer term? Yes, I'm sure some people, could have used that, but I almost feel like if for this sole proprietor thing, wouldn't it have just been better to give grants? And to give grants similar to maybe something like the restaurant revitalization fund, the difference between your 2020 and your 2019 gross receipts or something like that, something very simple that like is based on tax return, not based on, or, based on like something that everybody has to pull anyway. Or maybe just your average 3 months, 2019, maybe just give you a grant for like, this would have been it, because I think that would have saved so much confusion. We know that would have also, probably stopped some of these lenders that we don't feel all that great about that are kind of, potentially pulling off the system a little bit. I think that would have been just so much more straightforward. Because I mean, small business, like these sole proprietors that we're talking about, like these are the ones who have their heads down. They are trying to survive, and they're trying to focus so much on this that almost like a lot of them didn't even hear about this program. So then when they look up, they realize like, oh no, I'm too late to even take it. Or wait, what do I do? Oh, I have to like my taxes are still not done yet from 2020, and then it's
Yeah, absolutely. It was so massively overcomplicated. And I think there was also, until we got to the point where loans started being forgiven, right? I feel like there was almost this collective sigh, even from like people like us who are like telling people like these are going to be forgiven if you do all these things. We're just like, I really hope that's true. Like I believe it to be true. And they kept making the rules easier. But I remember the very first time I saw, it was a Friday night. I remember it so well. I had sat down with a glass of wine. I was watching a show with my husband, and they came out with the new forgiveness applications, or the first forgiveness applications. And it was like 1 million pages. There was no easy form that did not exist. it was like sole proprietors had to go through the same rigmarole and I'm like, no one is going to understand this. Like, are you kidding me? And I just remember feeling just like sad for people because I'm like, this is going to overwhelm. I know that this is going to overwhelm people. Not everybody has an accountant that they can trust. A lot of accountants are not up to speed on this and aren't even, they're trying to go through the longest tax season ever, right?
Yeah.
And they don't even know what's going on. And so there aren't even people to help people with this. And so thankfully they remedied that, right? And things got easier and easier. And then they took away the documentation requirements and all the ridiculousness about like proving how you paid yourself, like all that craziness, right? But at the beginning, I'm like, people are going to freak out, right? They're going to worry that they're not going to get their loans forgiven. And I think at the beginning, there's this distrust around like, nothing's for free. And I don't want to get stuck with, in some cases, pretty sizable loans, right? That people we weren't sure if they were going to do all the things, even with their best efforts, do everything correctly and the way that they needed to. And even just trying to be a person describing that with like, well, you have to keep your FTEs at a certain level and do this average, and just like that whole concept was so complicated. So overly complicated, in my opinion. I get why they didn't just say we're giving grants, but honestly, like it probably would have been a whole heck of a lot easier.
Right. I think, I totally agree. I mean, I see that if you see all the PPP fraud that's happened, we're taking the money and then they're going and, buying Lamborghinis or Rolex watches. I just saw, somebody bought a $100,000 Rolex with a PPP loan. Like, thankfully that person's going to jail, but you want to prevent those people that are just going to totally take advantage. But most people are going to try to step through the right hoops. Now, I do think that something that would have helped the program from the beginning would have been a better system for determining need, like more of a need-based approach as well. But that takes time. And that would have also, taken time to really like step through how to determine need, and then those people to pull it and the documentation and then somebody to review it. So I think that is probably one reason why need-based was probably tossed out the window. Had there been more time, I think that would have been a good way to funnel the money to the businesses that needed it the most. Yes. Because we had lots of businesses that did not decline and actually increased over the course of the pandemic, especially some of our e-commerce businesses and things like that. And those, could they have used the money? Sure. Absolutely. But did they need it as much as the person who, the restaurant that was completely shut down? No.
Yeah.
So, but it's all that like that tension of the urgency.
Well, and that's 100%. I totally agree with that, where I knew businesses that took it just because they could. And what they did, and I understand what they did, because there was so much like hesitancy, because you did have to sign off, right? To say like, essentially something along the lines of, financial uncertainty makes this loan necessary, something like that in the original application. And that freaked a lot of people out. Like, well, if I have emergency savings, are they going to come back and say I didn't really need it? Right. And these are the small businesses asking this question, right? They're like, I have a 401k that I could dip into. Are they going to say? And yet the big businesses that actually do have access to capital, like, yeah, we totally needed this.
Yeah.
And so then they put in the rule, I think, to try to help those small businesses feel more secure in getting the loan, that, that original safe harbor, and we've used safe harbor to mean a couple of different things, but the original safe harbor was around if you were under $2 million of a loan and you checked, yes, I need this, they're going to assume that was done in good faith. Right. So I think that was a good change at the time, but now I can also see where that, now we're coming back to in round 2, where the difference we saw is round 1, everybody was like, I don't know if I should do this. I don't know. It's not trust. I don't know if I trust this. I'm confused. I don't know. And then rules got more and more lax. And then we got into, second round coming out, and we'd already seen loans get forgiven. And all of a sudden that's when the fraud went like crazy, because now people are like, ooh, wait a second,
Yeah.
and now the opportunism and the everybody else is doing it, and the, like the ability to do it existed. And so that's when you saw the fraud happen. And so that's what's going to be interesting is what happens in those cases. Obviously, if you falsify a business, right? But it's like, if you don't have any need to prove need, right? If there's really nothing you need to do to prove need on these things, if your loan was under $2 million, I mean, there are a lot of people that got it that it's not fraudulent, right? It's not fraudulent, but that money could have gone towards those businesses that really needed it, right?
Yeah. And I actually was like walking through this with some people, like where we had this kind of conversation about ethics. It really came down to like ethics and like what they, felt like was right to step into. And, not everybody is having those conversations about their business. And, but it was one of those things where it was like, okay, you have hundreds of thousands of dollars of savings in your account and you have positive cash flow in your business. Do you need $20,000 like as a sole proprietor? I mean, do you need it? Do you want it enough to have your name listed on the registry that you received a PPP loan? Like, do you need it to where you want to step through the hoops of going and getting it and then getting it forgiven? Do you feel good at checking the box saying like, yes, I need this money? Like, is that, and you don't want to make that decision for anybody, but I'm in this like CFO position of like, trying to help people kind of navigate what they feel is the right course for their business, and also like kind of sometimes balance that with just general business ethics. And it puts some people in a weird position. And then there were other people that I was talking them into, yes, go get the money. You are the exact person that this program has been designed for. And I was almost trying to like, I'm like, I'm not trying to sell you anything here. I don't get anything by you going and getting a PPP loan. I'm just telling you, like, you hit all the boxes and your business could absolutely use it. Please go and apply.
Yes.
Like, and it was interesting to see the mentality difference between different people there.
100%. I saw that all over the place as well with just the mentality around it. And yeah, I mean, I agree. I'm glad that they added that 25% drop. One of the problems with that though, to get your second PPP is they didn't require any proof of that for smaller loans to get it. So you will have to show that upon forgiveness, but I have a lot of concerns, and we can kind of jump into this too, because I know you have some of the same concerns and I see people asking about it as well. I'll put one up here, about some of these things where, I think there are going to be people that might have issue with their loans getting forgiven, specifically those second draw loans, right? If maybe you didn't actually have a 25% drop and you applied for one, or perhaps you got them too close together. Now, maybe we will get some, I was talking to one of my lender friends yesterday, and he's like, maybe we'll get something from the SBA that says, like, that goes back to intent, right? And that allows people to say, well, my intent was, right, not to violate the rules, and that being, like not getting penalized for that. But as of right now, we don't know. So Hannah and I have both talked about this individually, but we both have a very similar approach to, reading the actual guidance. Go figure. And the fact that the guidance is very clear, and the fact that your covered periods can't overlap, and your minimum covered period is 8 weeks, and your covered period starts when you get the loan. Meaning, even if you're a sole proprietor and you get your loans within 8 weeks of one another, like Ed did here, right? And I know a lot of other people did.
Yeah.
Maybe, misled by people that they trusted or companies that they trusted. We don't know what's going to happen yet with all of that, but as of the way the guidance is written right now, it's not within line. That doesn't mean that they won't edit it and realize this is a problem and come out with something and say, okay, if your intent was not this, then they may relax the rules again. Again, it's one of those like, let's wait and see where this goes. But wait and see with the assumption in your head that, okay, maybe the second loan won't be forgiven. Right, Hannah? Is that what you would say?
Yeah, it makes me a little bit think about that, the other safe harbor of when people who got loans over, or the people who got loans and maybe didn't qualify for, the need, were allowed to return it within a certain amount of time, without any penalty and without any, concern about, fraudulent, certifications or anything like that. So I kind of wonder if we will go that direction, if maybe the SBA might come out and say, hey, it's okay, like this did happen, but return it by this time, no big deal. Or if maybe there'll be some and this is if there's guidance at all.
At all.
Right? We hope there will be, because this has happened so frequently with one lender in particular. You saw it on the screen. That, I mean, they weren't the only ones doing it, but they were the most common. And yeah, they were kind of the most egregious of going through and doing that. But I do kind of wonder if they do give us guidance, if it will say return the money, or if it will say, hey, it's fine, but do X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
So with that, my recommendation has been to people, like, do not spend your second draw if you can. If you haven't already spent it, don't spend it. And then I'm on the camp of wait and see. Or if you just really feel uncomfortable about it, you could return it. But like, I think that, like, don't spend it is probably the safest action at this point for most people.
Yeah, I think so too. And I'm hopeful, what I hope comes out of this is that people who gave negligent advice have to own that and have to reap the consequences of that, but not the people who trusted it, right?
Yeah.
That's the hope, that's where they will land. But I just think, it's part of kind of our professional duty to let people know about this and make sure that there's preparation, because I think sometimes you can, be in a position where people are listening to you and almost, I don't know. I feel like for you and I, Hannah, have a very similar approach to this, which is, I never want to be the reason that somebody is like, well, wait a second, you told me X and I did this, and now here's what happened, right? Mm-hmm. So, I tend to be very careful in anything that, any interpretations that I make. I look at what the guidance actually says, so do you. And I think that's really important. Not everybody does that. And so, you will get different schools of thought. And also, there is a personal risk, like, there's a personal risk component to this too. It's very similar to conversations that, people have about their tax advisors and things like that, right? There are some people that are like, if this, I do not want to be audited, I am going to keep every single receipt under the sun. I am not going to try to claim anything that's even in the gray area. There are those people that are like, it would just impact their ability to sleep at night. And then there are the people that are like, if they come after me, then, but they're like willing to do all kinds of things. And you want to find a CPA that aligns with how you, your own risk tolerance. I tend to be a very risk averse person, especially when giving, when interpreting things for mass amounts of people, right?
Yeah. And I think that has been the struggle a little bit with also using the platform of YouTube, because YouTube is fabulous. We love it. It is a great way to reach the masses quickly, but you also have people who are looking to make a buck on trends. And I think that is something that we've seen a lot, is people saying, oh, this is trending to talk about. And that's totally like a YouTube growth hack, like find the trends and then make a video on the trend and you'll get views, and so I've literally seen people that have no financial background, maybe they can, maybe they're reading guidance, maybe not, maybe they're just watching somebody else's video and then creating a video on their own because they're seeing an opportunity to, work with the algorithm. So, I think that's one thing that we've been really trying to just be like, hopefully a source of truth that we can try to, do our best to, level the playing field and actually not watch content that is misleading, because then it almost like you need to go back to like, what is the source of truth? The guidance is the source of truth, not YouTube video XYZ, because, that could be an interpretation of an interpretation.
Yeah.
And that's where we kind of have to go, like, I mean, it's kind of the Wild West.
Yeah. And the videos that get hits are the ones that tell people what they want to hear. I mean, I've seen YouTubers that literally every single day for 6 months came out with a video that was like, the next stimulus check coming, like coming next week or whatever. And you're like, no, it isn't. Like, why?
Yeah. And
Why
they get hundreds of thousands of views.
Yeah, it gets thousands of views. And then, it's interesting just to see that. And that's what I liked about you, and why I originally reached out to you, Hannah, was because I'm like, okay, here's a person who's doing it for seemingly the same reasons that I am, which is to get information out into the public. That is to dispel misinformation as much as we can, right? Obviously, we can't do all of it, and is not doing it because like, hey, I can grow a YouTube channel and, make a buck, right? It's more about getting that information out there. And I think that's, why both of us have grown audiences during this time frame, just because of becoming a place that people can trust. And so I think that's really important. And I think everybody in my audience, I know Hannah thanks everybody in her audience as well for like coming and listening and being willing to maybe sometimes not hear the things you want to hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I posted my video about the overlapping PPP loans really close. Like I think we've even posted them on the same day, or mine was the next day. And it was interesting to get the heat of the comments of, people being like, well, you don't know because, Wampley knows, or, whoever, so-and-so knows better. And it's like, we have to be able to stand behind like our interpretation of, we're trying to operate in integrity. And I think, both of us hold a CPA license. So like that actually holds us to a certain level of standards that a lot of people don't have to even, live up to. But we are certified public accountants. There's a reason the word public is there. And I think that kind of goes into like, we try to do the best we can, and sometimes it's the unpopular opinion. Certainly we would get more YouTube views if we just told people what they wanted to hear, but ultimately we're not going to do that.
Absolutely. Well, this is so great. If any other final thoughts you want to leave us with, any other thoughts on either winners or losers, or how you might do it different?
I still feel like some people were left behind even in the program, even with sole proprietors now being able to take, the line 31 or line 7 versus line 31. We still have people who just weren't eligible for anything. So I think that there was like, this real big drive to try to like open something up for everybody. All business owners can get this, but we still had a lot of people that weren't allowed in the program. So I think like there was that, but I think I don't know, who are the winners here? Who are the winners? I really had some clients, and I had some like people that I talked to that it was a game changer for their businesses. They did not have to let go employees that they would have had otherwise, especially those like salary consulting companies. When we look at, making those decisions on when to let people go, we look 3 or 4 months of cash flow ahead of time. Yeah. So the fact that we had, contracts basically not coming in for multiple months at a time, or receivables being pushed out, this was a way to really like step in with cash that would have otherwise had the business going into debt or laying off their employees. So we definitely had some businesses saved from this. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Yeah. But, at the end of the day, I think we could think of a restructured program, but again, hindsight. And
hindsight is 2020, and the hope is that hindsight is actually 2020. But the hope is that, hopefully we will never need something like this again. But the hope is that we will have learnings from this program. And I do think, I have heard so many stories, like it's easy to focus on all the negative, right? It's easy to focus on the things that could have been done better, or, had I known XYZ, I would have done this a little bit differently.
Right.
But at the same time, a lot of businesses got help that they needed, and they did end up moving the rules, like even the tax, implications were originally, that went in the right direction as well. So things finally got there, but there was just so much consternation in the middle of it and up and down and all of that. And it's interesting to like think back now to where everything felt so urgent all the time. And now I think we can have a little bit more perspective on it sitting, in May of 2021. But yeah, a lot of businesses though were helped by this and other forms of, assistance that were available. And I know that I feel really, I am just glad to have been able to be a part in that, even a tiny part. And same for you, I'm sure, right, Hannah? Like I love, and I would, continue to share with us your uplifting stories, the things that have helped, the things that have saved, because now we're seeing businesses that didn't think that they could survive 2020. Now, not just surviving, but now starting to thrive again. And so those are the stories that it makes you feel like it was all worth it, right?
Yeah. Because I think if you had asked either one of us, Jamie, Hannah, do you want to sign up to be like the source of news for a program that's constantly changing? And, you never know what's going to happen. And you might like be drinking wine on Friday night and then, never mind. Now you have to go make a video. We wouldn't have signed up to be like the person to tell everybody about this had we known what we were stepping into. I kind of describe it as like we started in a sprint and then it turned into a marathon. And we were sprinting through a marathon with this. But once we are here, now we're like, okay, we realize that all of this work has been for good purposes. And I love I even had friends that I told about like, do you can get a PPP loan? And they were like, oh, we didn't realize I have the story about my hairdresser, but I think all these people, this is life-changing money is essentially what it could be, or business changing money, game changing for sure. So I think, ultimately I'm feeling good about being part of, helping get the right messages out.
Absolutely. I agree. It's definitely worth it. But yeah, if you had told me like, hey, are you in for this? I'd have been like, wait a second. And now you're talking about 8 more years in the future. I'm just like, oh gosh.
Hopefully it's going to be less. But it didn't feel like it felt like either a full-time or a part-time job added on to whatever you were normally doing. Like it
100%.
definitely felt, it was, intense. So I am definitely, there's a certain amount of me, just in full transparency of like, okay, it's gone. Like the money's gone. We believe it's gone for now. So, taking a deep breath, and we know that we're still going to be talking about it, but it's probably not going to be at the same level of urgency and intensity that it has been. But now we also say like, well, what's next? We're moving on now. How do we operate our businesses in this kind of during/post pandemic? We're not post, but, kind of hopefully coming out of it. How do we operate our businesses, in this new way? So that's kind of where, that's where my channel is going as we're stepping into, okay, now we don't need to be talking about PPP so much. So what else do you guys want to know about? What do we, how can we continue to move our businesses forward without just this reliance on, this money that's coming in?
Well, and I would say too, in what I've said about it, is that I think that one of the things that also came out of this, because I'm a financial literacy educator, right? And you also, you work directly with clients, but also are an educator as well. And so finances are one of those things that a lot of people sort of like, it's easy and it's convenient to just like put your blinders on for as long as you can, right? It's one of those things that we just, it's not something that's super comfortable to most business owners. It's not really something that they like enjoy. And so that's always something, I'm working with people on, let's get past that and let's go to something better, right? Like let's create this new future together. And I think that one of the things that the pandemic did and everything was kind of open up okay, I I gotta get this stuff. I gotta get my financial house in order.
Yes.
I don't want this to happen again. I don't want to have to rely on government funding. I don't want to, be in a position again where I'm worried about, my business closing or, paying my mortgage or all of these things. And so I have seen, especially last year, a little bit less so this year. And so I hope that the lesson doesn't, roll off that quickly, but I have seen a lot more people who are interested in like, okay, how do I kind of make sure that I'm strong financially and that, hopefully not another pandemic, but anything, right? We know that things happen in life, in industries, in the economy. How can I be prepared for that? And so that's one of the positive things that I think came from it. And other things in the pandemic too, right? Just recognizing where some of those, weaker points might be and deciding to strengthen them and taking action to do so. We all have learned lessons through this time period.
Definitely.
I am not a good homeschooler. That's why
I am really super thankful for our teachers.
No patience whatsoever.
I mean, I think, I like, there's a comment right now from Christina that says, making sure that what we're spending is truly benefiting the business. I've seen so many businesses during this time really pull themselves back into what is necessary. And, before the pandemic, I call these austerity measures, where you're taking like business austerity measures to kind of get to like just what is required to like, what is that bare minimum? And I think that is never bad practice, like there's, understanding what you need and then what you really don't need to move the business forward. So I definitely think lots of great financial lessons coming out of it. And also, again, shining light into places that could be improved, So I think all of these things are, there will always be ups and downs in businesses. And so going through one, this might be the first time anybody has gone through one, and this was an extreme one. So kind of seeing what happens, you can set yourself up the next time to say, okay, like, I know I actually do need that cash savings account. I know I really do, need to make sure that every expense in my business is really working for me. I know I need to be set up and have, X, Y, or Z in my personal life to, in case I can't pay my mortgage or whatever that looks like, So I think, it's great. And I really do hope that people are, continuing to realize, continuing to remember what that felt like. So that we can prepare for the next time.
Absolutely. I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. All right. Well, we could probably talk forever.
I know. Like, where did an hour go? Oh,
I know, right? Like, we could probably talk forever about this. I'm sure we'll have you back on, but Hannah and I have been talking about getting together and doing kind of a collab for a long time. So I'm excited to, again, everybody make sure that they go follow Hannah's channel, Clara CFO, on YouTube. Make sure to follow me too if you're not subscribed, Jamie Trull. And we will be back with more, right? PPP is not going away anytime soon. And we'll be here to support you, on the road to forgiveness, right? And giving you all the information that we can along that road, and, hopefully being a trusted resource for you in all of that. So, all right. Thanks guys. Have a great rest of your day. Bye, Hannah.
Bye.